From Relay, this is Upgrade, episode 613 for April 27th, 2026. This episode is brought to you by Fitbod, Mercury Weather, Claude, and Steam Clock. My name is Mike Hurley, and I am joined at full volume by Jason Snell.
Hi, Mike Hurley. How are you?
I'm at full volume because I'm not recording in the spare bedroom today.
Oh, I see. Yes, well, not yet, but this may all get erased by breaking news later that we have to record a new version of the opening in your spare bedroom. Don't wake the baby up. Hello from.
Surely it can't happen again.
Upgrade.
Surely it can't happen again.
It can't happen again. Not for 15 years.
I have a Snell Talk question that comes in from Andrew, who wants to know, Jason, do you listen to the niche British Rest is History series, like the recent 1975 to 78 masterpiece? If so, do you enjoy them?
I mean, of course I do. I loved the Britain in 1974 series.
Yes.
And I'll tell you why. So the rest is history. One of the reasons that I love the rest is history is because it is storytelling, right? It is, I don't know if I assume I haven't said this publicly, but I realize that they haven't done a series about the British Civil War, and Tom Holland mentioned this great book about the British Civil War, the English Civil War. English Civil War. I think it was just an English Civil War at that point. Anyway, so I got the book. I did an interlibrary loan, and I got the book. I was like, well, I'll just read this book since they haven't done it. And what I realized is this is the sort of book that Tom Holland reads and then turns into great podcast storytelling. And it's a very long book with very small print. And I'm not going to read that. I'm not going to do that. I want Tom Holland, a trained historian, or Dominic Sandbrook, a trained historian, to read about the English Civil War and then tell an engaging story about it. So this is what I love about the rest is history. In fact, I might even say that something like the niche Rise of Margaret Thatcher 1975 to 1978 series that they just did is exactly the kind of thing I like from the rest is history, because they're not just telling me a story, but instead of it being a familiar story where I don't know many of the details, it's an unfamiliar story where I know none of the details. Yep. And other than, the very broadest, I know who Margaret Thatcher is, right?
Yeah.
But so I know where she ends up. But I find that delightful because it really is about telling the stories and all of the little weird details that they sprinkle in along the way, especially since this is Dominic's area of specialty. Yes. He knows a lot of he's obviously over the course of 20, 30 years of his professional research into this, there are certain stories that have flagged his interest as this is a ludicrous story. And he talks about all of those stories, yes, right? Because he knows those are the funniest, weirdest stories. So I love it. That's great storytelling. Basically,
Britain in the 70s was an absolute disaster. It was disastrous.
Yeah, I didn't realize how bad, and
it was so bad.
It gets so I just listened to the section this morning where the one minister who can't be fired because the majority is too small, Ben. He has a great scheme where he's going to give money to workers who are living in a factory that has been shut down, and they're going to make car radiators and orange juice.
Yeah,
in the same factory. And there's a moment where they pause and they're like, there must be some reason, right, why those two things in manufacturing wise, and then they move on from it, and it's just I love those details. They're so ridiculous. It's amazing.
Yeah. So I had previously recommended, when people ask us what series, I had recommended the Britain in 74 series.
Oh man,
this is just setting up the year in 1974 where we had 3 general elections in a year. Which 3 of them. That is
sign of a functioning
imagine
democracy.
A presidential election 3 times in one calendar year. We had that. And I was really hoping, I was very much looking forward to them returning to talk about the rest of everything that happens, because Britain only gets worse from this point.
Turns out.
Into when Margaret Thatcher comes in and makes things worse and then kind of controls them. Not necessarily in ways that are good for everyone, but kind of gets Britain back on a path.
It definitely puts into context the arrival of Margaret Thatcher, right? It's how could that happen? And it's oh, I see.
Yeah. And so I was really looking forward to them returning to it, because they did it in 2024. They've just followed up in 26. And in classic Rest is History style, they finished the series now. They're going to do more next year. And Margaret Thatcher is still not the Prime Minister.
Not the Prime Minister. Yeah, that's the way to do it. You got to leave them wanting more.
Yeah. And I do. And I'm looking forward to it. It's the best show. It's the best podcast around. So I put links in the show notes to those 2 seasons if people want to go
Great.
check them out.
That's great.
If you have a Snell Talk question of your own that you would like to send in to help us open up a show or do whatever, please go to upgradefeedback.com and send in your Snell Talk question. We have some follow-up, Jason. So last time, the main important thing of last week's episode was our Apple at 50 draft.
Clearly.
And we gave people the opportunity to vote on who had the best list. And I knew how this vote was going to go, but it didn't go exactly how I thought. With 75% of respondents saying that you had the better list, and mine was 25%. I don't think that it's that different, but sure, I was picking from the heart, so I'm the real winner.
You made people have to choose. It might be that 75% of people think that I very barely beat you. Right?
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah.
Right? So it's
I don't
okay.
think that is the case, but
it doesn't mean that they think it was a blowout. It just means that a lot of people thought I won. That's all that means.
And I don't care because I was picking from the heart. I know I picked too many iPods, but you know what? I didn't pick up a printer. I didn't put a printer on my list, but somehow we got that on there. And I actually have a question that came in from Steve, who wrote in and said, any Apple list without the laser writer is not an Apple list. That product and what it catalyzed had an impact on society that rivals the iPhone.
Yep.
Thank you, Jason. I'm not sure if I agree with that part. You know how good
That's
that
okay. That's why you didn't pick the laser writer, but I did.
Yeah. Do you agree with Steve's take?
It had a huge impact. It did. On the computer industry, certainly. On society, maybe somewhat. Rivaling the iPhone, I would say probably. I wouldn't go that far, but still pretty good. Pretty good.
I appreciated you attempting to see if you could get to Steve's point of view, but you couldn't get there.
I wanted to see how far down the road I could go before I said, nope, I can't go any further. And that's how far is like impact. It did have an impact on society. What's this next part? Rivals the iPhone? Well, what does rivals mean? Is it no,
rivals
really.
and losers?
No. Yeah.
And obviously we got a bunch of inevitable. I can't believe nobody picked this. And
of
I
course.
wanted to just read a couple of these because they're funny to me.
Yeah.
Thomas says, I can't believe nobody picked the eMac.
I can. I didn't pick
too.
it. The eMac is weird. It wasn't even, I mean, it's interesting and all, but like it's just a G3 iMac with a G4 in it kind of, and for education, but then they sold it and like whatever. I mean, again, it you can have it, Thomas. It's on your list.
It's on your list.
Number one draft pick.
But I feel like, to me, the fact that we picked both the G3 and the G4 is like, that's enough. The eMac, I don't know, man. Yeah. I don't know if it deserves to be on there.
Pick the eMate instead.
Yeah, exactly. We picked the eMate. Be happy about it. And then Eric wrote in and said, I'm a bit sad to see the original Apple AirPort not get its place on any lists. It wasn't the first wireless router, but it was definitely the attainable wireless access point as an individual and an inflection point.
So historically important, and I thought about it. The UFO-shaped airports, the kind of gray one and then the white one, were really impactful. And when I was trying to think of Apple hardware products that were not, computers, but accessories, that's one that I thought about. And in the end, I just decided they were kind of unreliable. They burned out, that I decided it left enough of a bad taste in my mouth that I couldn't pick it. But I thought about picking it. I'll put it that way. I mean, that original airport was it was groundbreaking, but it was also so early. For those who don't remember, like, the number one mode that you would use that airport is it had a modem in it. So you'd plug it into your telephone. And when a device came on the Wi-Fi and wanted to get to the internet, the airport would dial your ISP and then you could be on the internet.
Whoa.
That's how long ago this was. I mean, you could also put it on Ethernet, and I had DSL at this point. But like that was that. It was long ago. Anyway, it was a huge deal, but I just decided one of the suggestions we got from somebody was the add-on card for airport that added airport to Apple's early airport capable laptops. It didn't used to come built in. You had to flip open the keyboard and slide this card in order to get Wi-Fi support on your laptop, because only some people need Wi-Fi. But we didn't pick either of those things. So, yeah.
I have a couple of things on the airports. I'll put a link in the show notes to the Wikipedia page. One, the original airports, the UFO ones, I'd forgotten how big the Apple logo was on those, and it looks honestly ridiculous to me, even though the design was cool at the time. And it reminded me of the Airport Express, which was just basically the very big looking power adapter, and that was a cool product.
That was interesting. Also burned out a lot, but yes.
I'm sure they all did eventually.
Yeah.
And then I had forgotten that because in my mind, when I think of the airport now, I think of that kind of like big white tower one.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten that was a time capsule.
That was the time capsule. The non-time capsule airports were smaller.
Yeah, I think of just the little.
They looked like
big
little
guy.
plastic Mac Minis, kind of.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. And an anonymous person wrote in and said, "You'll be pleased to know that the iMac Pro continues to live on at Apple in every mail room. It always makes me smile when I see them. I would love to know what's going on there."
Is that what this means? Is mailroom?
Yeah, this person had written in, and it clearly indicated to me in the language that they spoke, because it was more than this, that they were writing in from the UK, I believe. But it says post room, and I code switched to mail room for you and everybody else.
that makes more sense. I was thinking, like, is this like post production of video or something like that? But in the mail, it sounds like a thing that could totally live in the mail room. But
iMac Pro though, we could
gotta go somewhere.
A 5K iMac. Yeah, I don't know if we needed the Pro.
I don't know.
It's like when you would see like Tim Cook touring facilities, and there'd be like iMacs running Windows, like hanging around over the top of robots and stuff. That's what it reminds me of. Now I have a completely unrelated question. And this is going back to us talking about the MacBook Neo a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Holly wrote in and said, with the success of the MacBook Neo causing potential shortages of the binned A18 Pro, do you expect this to impact other planned product launches that may use the same chip? For example, could the new Apple TV box that have used that chip as well be delayed?
It's possible. I would think that Apple would be planning out their chip usage for eventualities like this. And does it need to be an A18 Pro? Could it be an A18? Could it be from some, an A17? Could it be from some other bin? Like, I think they've got options there. So I would imagine, but it's possible. Like, if they really, again, I have a hard time believing that they didn't have a contingency plan for the MacBook Neo being a big hit, because it certainly was a real possibility. And so I don't think they would be surprised. And that makes me think that it would be unlikely that they would say, oh no, we had planned on using all those in this Apple TV and now we can't release it. But I don't know. Maybe it's possible, but I would think they would be better at planning than that.
I can't get over how often I'm seeing the MacBook Neo now, just like in videos and people just using them, and like it's just not a big deal. And it's like, I still really want one, Jason.
You have no use for it.
I have zero use for it, but I still want one. This episode is brought to you by Fitbod. It can be hard to change your fitness level. It can feel like something you have to climb up a big hill to do, essentially. Maybe you want to climb up hills to change your fitness level, but it doesn't matter no matter what you want to do, Fitbod is there to support you. They are an easy and affordable way to build a fitness plan that is made for you, because everybody has their own path to personal fitness. So Fitbod uses data to customize things to suit you perfectly. It will adapt as you're improving, making sure every workout is challenging, pushing you to make the progress that you want. Because you will see the best results when a workout program is tailored to you, to your experience, to your environment, to your goals, to any equipment that you may have. Fitbod stores this information and your preferences in your Fitbod gym profile. It's then going to track the workouts that you're doing, see how your muscles are recovering, and it will balance those workouts for you. So you're going to get a well-balanced workout routine because they're tracking your fatigue, tracking your recovery. On the side, this means you're not going to get bored because you're going to be doing new types of exercises, but also it's going to make sure that you're avoiding burnout and keeping up your momentum. Fitbod builds your best possible workout by combining exercise science and AI. They have analyzed billions of data points that are fine-tuned by a team of certified personal trainers to make sure that you're going to get the best workout possible, and they support it with over 1,000 demonstration videos, so every time you're getting a new exercise, you're going to be sure you're learning that new movement the right way. The Fitbod app is really easy to use. You can stay informed with their tracking charts, weekly reports, and sharing cards, so you can keep track of your achievements and personal bests and share them with your friends and family. Fitbod also integrates with your Apple Watch, your Wear OS smartwatch, and other apps you might use like Strava, Fitbit, and Apple Health. Personalized training of this quality can be expensive, but Fitbod is only $15.99 a month or $95.99 a year. But you can get yourself 25% off your membership by signing up today at fitbod.me/upgrade. So go now and get your customized fitness plan at fitbod.me/upgrade. One more time, that is fitbod.me/upgrade. You will get 25% off your membership and show your support for the show. Thanks to Fitbod for their support of Upgrade and Relay. So obviously we're going to talk more about Tim Cook today. So on the last episode, we were giving our kind of initial reactions and some thoughts that we had.
Yeah, it was a snap,
sudden
surprise podcast for those who hadn't read that much into it. We were done, and Mike was home, and then and then the Tim Cook news happened. So we got something in the show.
We got it together, and I was very happy that we got something together, because imagine how hilarious that would have been. For that being just sitting out there for a week, the draft. Boy. But here we are. So after a week more to think about it, how are you feeling now about this? Is there any areas that are interesting to you, exciting to you, concerning? Where are you?
I'm kind of interested in. It's been interesting to see everybody's takes on this. I find it very funny that there's definitely a certain portion of the internet. I mean, it happens every time, right? It's almost like a Rorschach test of the content creators out there who are like, how can I make this be a reason to repeat my worldview again, right? Or right, like, and I've seen some really amazing takes that are like, hey, there's going to be a new CEO at Apple, so let me complain about my, personal whatever it is, my love of weird Chinese Android phones and why they aren't available more broadly, and making that about John Ternus somehow. Like, okay, like there's a bunch of those I've seen. I've seen a bunch of kind of like one last chance to complain about Tim Cook and his treatment of the Chinese government and of the Trump administration, which, fair due, like get your licks in. It's just interesting to see the different reactions that people have to it. Also the glee in some areas where it's like, oh, finally with Tim Cook not there, things will be different, which, I also think is maybe a little overheated, because he's still going to be there as the executive chairman. And second, this is a many-year plan, and John Ternus has been a major part of Apple all this time. And while I'm enthusiastic for the opportunity for change, I think it would be a mistake to assume that, especially that everything you've disliked about Apple, it's like Alan Dye again, right? Which is like, you can be hopeful for change and think that this is an opportunity for change without kind of loading all of your personal frustrations onto this one change and thinking that this is the one that's going to solve it, because I think you're going to end up disappointed, because there's going to be way more continuity than you would expect. So I don't know. A lot of it has just been human nature. The spread of reactions has not been surprising. In fact, I was amused that there was one piece that I saw that was very much like, I'm disappointed that everybody's just been praising Tim Cook, but I'm going to be critical of him. And I thought, well, did you not look hard for everybody's been praising Tim Cook is not how I would phrase it. But Sure, again, get your take in, which was that was a completely different take about other reasons. I thought that the guy who wrote Apple in China wrote an op-ed in the New York Times that I thought was kind of interesting, where he was essentially restating his thesis, which is that, Apple's being successful also built up China's manufacturing capacity. I would argue maybe he takes it a little too far when he makes that argument. It's much more dramatic to say sort of like Apple made China, which is not true, but Apple helped. That is true. Apple helped, but I think he overstates it sometimes. I think to make his point seem more broad and more important. But I do think that was interesting. And then, of course, he also makes the point that I think is really well made in his book, that one of the challenges that is that in priming Apple for success, Tim Cook has also made Apple incredibly vulnerable in terms of its reliance on China in the supply chain, its use of Chinese markets to grow the business, but that's dangerous too in case there's something cut off there. And then he made the point, I think, that I haven't seen anywhere else, that Tim Cook basically doesn't go to Taiwan, even though Taiwan Semiconductor is his chip supplier, because it would offend China, so he doesn't go. I thought that was interesting too. So there's some interesting bits in there but it's been interesting to see the reaction, and I'm glad that we got to be in on the forefront of that. I mean, we literally recorded that right after, and then I sat down and I wrote a couple thousand words about it, and then I got to watch everybody else do their thing.
Yeah, I think for me, I kind of have a few different feelings going on. I agree with everything you said, that right, like it is very funny to watch like all of the hammers and nails that people are using, right?
Yeah.
Like you have this hammer, and so this is just a nail for you to hit on. And I think if I am to have a hammer and nail, it is that I just like it when interesting things happen, because then we can talk about them. Like, I remember when this was all breaking last year, about it seeming like that we were really speeding up towards some kind of retirement message, like with the FT thing, and then with subsequent reporting from Mark Gurman. I was hoping it would happen because I thought it would be interesting to cover. And so I feel like the level of interestingness I actually think is higher than I had imagined. Like, now we're here, it's like, oh, it's interesting this has happened. Now we have a few months of speculation, and then things are going to start to change from that point, because there will be change. Like, there will not be rapid, massive change to Apple. Like, Ternus is going to make a mark, and then things will slowly start to change from there. But this will absolutely, come September 1st, be a change, an inflection point for the company, because he is a person with his own opinions,
right?
And he is going to have them. And like, it's like, people say like, oh, he's been there forever. He's gonna, I think, he's gonna just do whatever Tim wanted to do. And I don't think that is completely accurate. Like, being part of the machine doesn't mean he agrees with everything that everybody wants to do. And now, instead of just being on the team, he's now the guy in charge.
He's now the guy in charge. I think you could probably say that probably over the last 5 years to 6 months or whatever, since he became SVP to now, he's obviously been increasingly involved as part of his training and run up to being the CEO, increasingly involved in this process, but still in the end, it's Tim Cook's decision. I would say that that probably since December, assuming that that's when everything was finally just decided, that any decisions that are kind of long-term decisions, that Tim Cook has been bringing John Ternus into the loop about, if he wasn't already. And then, but you're right, it's going to continue to transition over the next few months until September, and then we'll go from there. And there will be change. I think the question is just sort of like everybody. It's just very easy to overload all your dreams and hopes and put them in a box and think, well, John Ternus is going to come in and solve all these problems. And there is going to be more continuity than you might expect, because he is on the senior management team, but he will also make changes because he's not in that same role. Both of those things can be true. I think, I wanted to mention another thing that I thought was really funny, is that there was that one report out there about how, like, what was he involved with, and he was really into the iPad stuff, and making the iPad more usable, and then, but he was also one of the people behind the Touch Bar, and I've seen that thrown up as like, failure, the Touch Bar. And I'm just going to say it again, he's the hardware guy. The Touch Bar hardware is kind of impressive. The problem with the Touch Bar was not the hardware. It was the fact that the software group didn't bother with the Touch Bar. And that is a hill I will die on, is that the Touch Bar could have been better hardware and they could have iterated on it. But what I find interesting about the Touch Bar is that it was an interesting piece of hardware that was, you could see the software group run away from it. Like, they never did anything to make it better when it could have been much more interesting. They just didn't bother. And that, to me, I thought that was one of the most visible examples of one part of Apple just not playing ball with the other part, where like literally you could see the hardware group thought this was worth doing, the software group didn't, so they didn't. And that was a bad bit of management who, Tim Cook's level, right? That they shipped a hardware feature on their laptop that their software group didn't want to do anything with. And so it just laid there until they finally got rid of it. Like, I'm sorry. I just, and that to me, that's always a sign of an argument that is weak, is that it's somebody who's just cherry picking something that they don't really have all the facts about, or they want to just use it because they want to throw that in there at John Ternus. It's like, that is a much more complicated story. But sure. Fine.
I have two areas that I want to get your take on for potential areas of change. One is the App Store. Do we think there will be any change to the App Store and the business of the App Store? And two, do you think there will be any change to how Apple events are conducted?
App Store, what I would say is this is an opportunity for a change in policy if a change in policy is something that John Ternus wants to do. I think it's very clear, and we can go back to all of those court transcripts, right? It's very clear that Phil Schiller even made the argument that maybe they should live up to what Steve Jobs had said, which was, we're really just here to cover our own expenses. And once they're making $1 billion on the App Store, maybe they should start easing some of the rules of the App Store or some of their cut of the revenue from the App Store. And it's clearly that somebody, whether it was the CFO or whether it was Tim Cook, somebody was like, no, maximize revenue. That's what we're here to do now, which is not what the original idea was as sold by Steve Jobs. And Schiller was like, maybe we should, say we've got our cut and the rest of this is to the benefit of our developers. Now that's a decision that if Tim Cook didn't make it directly, he allowed it to be the decision, right? If the CFO was like, no, and Tim Cook's like, all right, I'm going to go with the CFO here, it's still his decision. Well, that's an area where John Ternus, we don't know. Maybe John Ternus in the background was like, I don't love this. This has gotten us like maybe he's making a lot of the arguments we're making, which is like, have we gone down this path too far? Have we been too aggressive? And are we courting just more trouble from all of these other groups, all these other regulators, when we're doing fine? And that like the best thing here is not to have this hard rule, but to like back off. Maybe not. But I would say that it's unlikely that Tim Cook, who allowed this decision to happen in the first place, is going to backtrack. But John Ternus could say, it's a new era and we're going to make some changes. And he has the ability to do that, I would say, in a way that Tim Cook is just not going to do. So, in terms of the App Store, that's what I think is like, there's an opportunity for change here because the old regime is gone. And so the new regime, I know it's a lot of the same people, but like the boss is different. And this is what I've been saying all along. It's a lot easier to get the new boss to say, let's change some things, than it is for the old boss to say, hey, some of those decisions I made in the past, they were bad and I'm going to change them, right? It's easier for a new person to say that.
Yeah, because I wonder if you're coming into this role, do you want to now enter yourself into the ongoing legal problems that are just going to continue for all of history? Because no one's going to give this up. Like it's a good kind of area for governments to attack. Do you just kind of hold up your hands and be like, forget about it? And also, if you're a hardware guy, if he was involved in Vision Pro, say, we all know what happened there. Like, we all saw that developers weren't interested. And if you have ideas for new platforms in the future, would it be a good idea to maybe try and make developers a bit happier with you again?
Exactly.
This is obviously something that is not lost on them. Like, I do not believe that Apple are not aware of this, right? Because, one, we're all talking about it all the time, and I know that they pay attention to the media, but also they know more than anyone that developers clearly were not interested in that platform. And so what, now you can never make another platform? Like, you're basically, it has to be piggybacking on the iPhone forever? Like, that's not a good idea. Like I believe that they need to try and incentivize developers. So maybe you just take this as your time to just do that. I don't know.
Also, I think, I mean, because I'm sensitive to the argument that the first thing that the new CEO does is come in and announce a policy that has the effect of decreasing revenue, right?
Yeah.
I can understand, and I've seen this argument. It's like, well, they'll never do that because that's the last thing that the new CEO would want to do. But my counter argument would be, you could also say that settling a bunch of lawsuits, reducing friction with the EU, solving some political pressure in the US, and also dealing with this in other regions, creating maybe a single worldwide Apple policy that lowers the tension, lowers the scrutiny being placed on Apple in this moment, is also beneficial to Apple, right? That's my counter argument, is that it's not all. I would argue, in fact, that one of the reasons we got here is because Apple's executives overemphasized the value of like App Store revenue and some aspects of App Store policy, and felt like they were worth more than all the stories in the media, all the scrutiny from regulators. Like, and I don't believe that's true. I think Apple makes so much money from so many different areas that a small reduction, not a vacancy of all that revenue, a small reduction in one small revenue line amid all the other revenue lines in exchange for reduced legal encumbrance and scrutiny, and maybe a better relationship with your third-party developers that you're trying to cultivate because you're the new boss and you can turn the page now, especially, like, maybe that's a better story. But he may also, like, we don't know. He may also feel like that's an area that he doesn't have as much power over, that like that's not where he wants to spend his political capital, is on App Store policy, because he's got bigger fish to fry. That's also possible.
And then what about Apple events then?
In terms of events, yeah. Again, I mean, I would say anything's possible. I think you're going to need to see. I mean, I'd be interested to see what Phil Schiller thinks, because Phil Schiller's in charge of events, and what Greg Joswiak thinks, because he's in charge of product marketing. They have experimented with a bunch of different ways of doing it. I think the truth is that the only events that we can count on are the iPhone and WWDC. Mm-hmm. I think they're probably pretty happy with them.
Being there they are production-wise.
Yeah, that they're all kind of pre-produced and completely controlled. And yet they still can invite the press or the developers or both to those events. And then they're just playing a video, but they also have kind of an in-person element. And I think they're probably pretty happy with it. So, John Ternus could say, hey, is there any way for us to go back to streaming it live, but having it be sort of like a couple of hosts and we talk about some stuff and then we throw it to videos? And, you could do that, but what's the benefit? And there's a lot of different downsides of that. So anything could happen. My gut feeling is that the way events are changing for Apple is that you're going to see more things like the MacBook Neo, where there's a press event somewhere and there's a video and there's a hands-on, but it's not, that was an experience, I know, but like that's what that was. Is it was an event that happened for press and influencers and things, but there was also just a press release and a product video, and then they moved on. So I think that I doubt there will be much immediate change in that area, but I do think that they're always thinking of tinkering with the format because they just want to get the most publicity and exposure. But for the new iPhone, I think the way they've done it is probably the way that they want to do it from now on.
So Tim Cook is remaining around, right? He's, while taking the role of executive chairman, is also involved in some day-to-day operation of the business, right? Like, the political stuff is a level of day-to-day operation. So, like, he's not gone.
Right.
How long do you think do you think this is, I mean, we'll get to some stuff that he said later on about being long-term, but do you think this is expected to be a long-term post?
I think he'll be there at least 5 years.
At least 5. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, in that regard, what do you think about, like, is he going to actually be able to let go? Or, like, is it going to be hard for Ternus to, like, he's right there. You know, the guy's right there.
Well, okay. Let me frame this differently. If you're the CEO for 15 years, and then you've got your protege that you're going to bring along, and now you're going to be the executive chairman, are you going to be able to let it go? I think that's a good question. Is Tim Cook going to be disciplined enough to allow John Ternus to have the space to be his own CEO while focusing on the areas where he needs to specifically focus as executive chairman? I'm going to say he's going to have no problem with it because he's Tim Cook, and he strikes me as an incredibly disciplined person who wants to give his successor the space to learn the job. And so that's the difference there, right? It's like, I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing to say, I don't know about this setup, but I think about Tim Cook and everything we know about Tim Cook, and I just don't think Tim Cook is going to be meddling in John Ternus's business. I think they will be clear boundaries about like what he needs to care about as a board member, as the executive chairman of the board, versus what the CEO will be doing. And you know, my history on my one nonprofit board that I was on is the job of the board is not to be the micromanager of the CEO or the executive director in our case. It's not. It's to be, you know, representing the shareholders, due diligence, advice, but it's not like the org chart that the board is a human being that the CEO reports to. That's not quite how it works. And I think that I just have a great deal of confidence that part of this is all about Tim Cook giving John Ternus the best runway, being available for advice, but I just can't imagine that Tim Cook is like, yeah, I'm going to micromanage that guy. I'm really going to be in charge. I can't see it.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point about the discipline. You know, it's like I wonder, like, you know, what it will feel like for Ternus, and also that there are elements where it's going to be odd, right? He wants to make a change, but then Ternus has to go sell it to India and China. It's like, what is that going to be like, you know? But I guess that's the same as anybody working for the CEO, which Tim is going to have this strange role where he is the executive chairman of the board, but is also kind of like a member of the team, depending on what is needed of him at any one time. But yes, I think you've made a really great point that Tim Cook made that decision, so he's going to stick by it. And then it's up to John Ternus to be able to feel confident enough in himself that he will be able to tell Tim what he's doing and what he's not doing. Yeah,
and also, let's be clear, when they make that announcement that says Tim Cook is going to still be involved in dealing with, you know, global issues, et cetera, and when Donald Trump comes out, we miss this part, right? Like the next day, and says, "Oh, I'm going to miss Tim Cook all the more." But he'll still be around, and I'll still talk to him. Like, this is literally the message Apple is sending. And I've seen people say, like, oh, can John Ternus, we may get to some of this later, can John Ternus really avoid dealing with all the political issues and all of that? It's like, well, this is what Apple's setting up here. Is this announcement is very literally like, world leaders continue to call Tim Cook. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. And if they call John Ternus, they're going to get Tim Cook, right? It's going to be like, can I speak to John Ternus? Yeah, this is Tim. Yeah, that's going to be it, right? Like that's how it's going to be for those world leaders. That's his bailiwick, and you know that not only is that meant to insulate Ternus, but it's also so when I hear people say, "Oh yeah, but what's going to stop Donald Trump from calling up John Ternus?" The answer is going to be because Donald Trump doesn't want to talk to John Ternus. He has a personal relationship with Tim Cook, and he knows Tim Cook, and he knows Tim Cook's the person he's supposed to talk to, so he'll continue to talk to him. That's the idea there.
I agree. And like I'm seeing it in our Discord, you mentioned it too. And I'll point this out again, I do think people are over-indexing on Trump in this scenario. Like, it's not just him. It's
China.
It's every country around the world.
It's India. And it is all of that where, because Cook has got those relationships. And that is, I mean, Trump is the one that's, especially for Americans, the most visible, but there are lots. And that is a whole part of the business that honestly, not only does Cook have the contacts there, but it would take years more for Ternus to get up to speed with them. And I'm sure that's part of the deal. But like, that's one of the reasons this is happening, is that Tim Cook can take that load when he's learning other stuff, and then gradually he will learn it over time so that he can take it over from Tim.
It's like in 15 years' time, if John Ternus has had a good stewardship of the company and has built relationships with the world leaders, I expect this to go exactly the same for the next person, because it's relationships, and Apple has the ability to manage these relationships effectively. And it's like, as the leaders change, I don't expect him to continue working with new people, but for as long as they remain, and in some parts of the world that could be a very long time for some of these people, it makes sense to have some level of continuity for a period of time until Ternus is like in that world too. And it's also like, if you have the ability to not have to give him everything to deal with on day one, then exactly, you should do that.
That's the whole idea here.
This episode is brought to you by Mercury Weather. Mercury Weather is a thoughtfully designed, I will say beautiful, weather app that shows all essential weather details at a glance. It has a wonderful, colorful interface that dynamically adapts to conditions, with a warm orange palette on a sunny day, icy tones on a cold day, or a deep blue on a rainy night. Mercury uses a glanceable chart layout to present the hourly and daily forecast in a way that feels intuitive right away. I really like when I open Mercury Weather and I can see kind of like my daily forecast, like for the next 7 days. And it shows me kind of a line between each day, which tracks the temperatures, both for the high and the low, which is really important, because just knowing the high will not give me at least everything I need to know, because here in London, here in the UK, those highs and lows can be very different from each other. And so it's really good to be able to have that information all laid out clearly with the lines drawing between them, so I can see the like where it rises and where it dips. It's really lovely. They also have a really cool feature for frequent travelers. Mercury's trip forecast feature automatically shows the weather at your destination right in your daily forecast timeline. You just tell it where you're going to be and when, so you're always going to see the weather for where you'll be, not just where you are. When the weather gets serious, Mercury offers storm and hurricane tracking with maps, live positions, forecast paths, cones, and intensity, plus widgets so you can keep tabs on a specific storm or the closest one right from your home screen. Mercury Weather's gorgeous interface makes it a delight to check the weather every day, even on grey and rainy ones. The app's business model is simple. No ads, no selling of user data. Mercury is available on iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, and Mac. You download it, use the standard features for free, and upgrade to Mercury Premium to unlock everything. Go to mercuryweather.app/upgrade to download Mercury Weather now, and use that link so they'll know that you came to them from this show. That is mercuryweather.app/upgrade. The link is in the show notes as well. Try it out, and then you can get all the standard features for free. Our thanks to Mercury Weather for their support of this show and Relay. So we've got some additional reporting. That obviously happened after we spoke last week. So Mark Gurman has shared some quotes from an all-hands meeting that the outgoing and incoming CEOs did together at Apple. So Tim shared that he was, quote, healthy and plans to serve as executive chairman for a long time. So the idea of sharing the healthy part is interesting, right? It's like they didn't mention this really anywhere, and I can't remember which podcast I was listening to. I've listened to lots of them now, but stating that like this seems to maybe have been something they wanted to get out there because it wasn't mentioned, and maybe they didn't need to think about that. But now Tim is saying like, "Don't worry, I'm all good." He also said, "I'll be here to offer my knowledge and experience and be a sounding board anytime I'm called upon. Apple will be my top priority. It's who I am at my core, and I can't imagine it any other way."
Sounds about right.
Yeah. On the political side, he said, "This is an area where we've built relationships over multiple years and a decade plus, and I think I can help with that, and I'll probably help on some other things." That is so nebulous, right? Like, some other stuff. Yeah. I'll be doing web objects. I'll be adjusting the what is it? I'll be in Cafe Max checking the pizzas out.
I'll be looking at the machining on the factory in India.
I'll be popping up.
Yeah.
This is a quote from Mark Gurman. Cook was asked why he decided now was the time to step down. He said he desired the best ever transition, which means that the business had to be going great, the product roadmap had to be incredible, and for Ternus to be ready for the role. He said he wanted the transition to be a textbook succession plan, the best in the world, and I hope that business schools and so forth are writing about it.
Yep. This is what I've been saying.
Yeah, you were right.
Tim Cook wants the best transition, and I'll just say, he didn't get it, and he wants it, and I get why. Like, I totally get it, and that's what they're going for here. Is Tim Cook didn't want to stick around, because keep in mind, every year, I mean, reasonably, let's just view it this way. Every year he stays as CEO is one fewer year maybe that he can be in a mentorship executive chairman role, and I think he doesn't want to make it that, like, well, I'm going to stay longer and then I'm just going to say later and disappear after a year. Like, he doesn't want that. Also, there's the other thing here is Ternus to be ready for the role, right? Like, you also don't want it to be that Tim Cook says, I got to go. I got a thing. And John Ternus is like, well, wait, I'm not ready, right? You want to hit the timing right where things look good and you think the guy who's going to take the seat is ready for it. Because if you wait too long, he's going to be impatient. Maybe he'll even go somewhere else. Who knows? Or be unhappy. So you got to get the timing right. And part of the timing is he ready? I don't get the sense from anyone here that John Ternus isn't ready for this job. Because if he wasn't, they would just wait and do it later, right? Like, they're doing it now because they think now is the optimal time. And if there's anybody who's focused on the optimal, it's Tim Cook.
And that readiness may have also been kind of functional of like, all right, we've made the decision. Now let's have John spend some time with every team. Let's have him go and really understand what's going on in Deirdre O'Brien's team. And let's go have him really understand, just
that may be happening
that time.
Now, right?
Yeah.
Between now and September, there may be a bunch of that going on if there wasn't already.
Exactly. Yeah, so that there will be bits and bobs that they can do without causing too much attention, and then some that they will do from now. But, start having this guy. And also, his overall visibility has changed, right? Where, as you mentioned with the Neo, but even before then, he's giving more interviews and he is being the person speaking about products more. And so giving him a bit more experience in this world, but also visibility amongst the media, etc. Right? So he is kind of becoming more of a public presence as such. And then John Ternus said he was especially excited to be stepping into the role at this moment. He said, because I am telling you, we are about to change the world once again. I'm not exaggerating when I say this is the most exciting time to be building products and services at Apple in my entire career. So that sounds very exciting. I mean, you can say that. Do you mean it? Maybe, right? As we spoke about before, you if you're Tim Cook, a great time to do this is if there's about to be a bunch of change. If they've got some products that they're really excited about, and that can be hardware and software, and should be, right? That if they've really cracked Apple Intelligence and are feeling good about that, excellent time to do it. And if they have a bunch of iPhones or Macs on the horizon that they think are really good, also a great time to do it. And so Ternus may be correct. This might be the most exciting time possible for him to have done this, which coincides with it's also the exact perfect time to make the transition.
Sure. I will also say Apple always says that the pipeline they have is the most exciting and amazing one ever. So
wouldn't you say, Jason, that every year is more exciting than
I think that they would. I think that's the case. And I see people who's like, oh, what does he mean? It's like, well, he means that he's saying positive things about the future to Wall Street and to everybody else. But, maybe he's also thinking about that folding
the possibilities
phone and the
there,
home
though, right?
stuff and who
even
knows
the
what.
Stuff we know about suggests that the possibility could be there. That if they can actually nail those products and make them all really good, this year's iPhone, next year's iPhone, which could both be big deals, and touchscreen MacBook Pros, and some home stuff,
whatever's
and
going on
Apple
with
Intelligence,
Neo,
whatever's going on with a MacBook. There is a possibility in which that could be accurate just based on what we know. And so it's exciting to hear him say it. We also have more information from Mark Gurman about Johny Srouji. and kind of the position that he is in now as Chief Hardware Officer. So apparently, following up from his previous reporting, at the end of last year, Johny Srouji approached Tim Cook to say that he was considering leaving Apple after feeling burned out from leading the Silicon team, which has been a very big job, very relentless work. And also there's a lot of reporting about, there's a lot of reporting in Mark's piece about Srouji being quite a hard leader. And so maybe that is tiring, maybe on him. And apparently that people, so it might be some people that are surprised with the change in leadership from Ternus to Srouji.
Yeah.
So maybe he wore himself out a little bit, being a bit too intense. And so apparently Cook offered him, quote, a massive new compensation package and a broader role as Apple's first chief hardware officer. That job, which combines Srouji's old role and Ternus's current oversight of hardware engineering, this is what Mark says, effectively makes him the number 2 executive at Apple. Now, when I read that, I was like, all right, Mark, come on. But then I started thinking about it, right? So in Tim's era, the CEO is number 1 and the chief operating officer is number 2, which is pretty standard for a business. But I was thinking that, to Tim, the most important person other than him is the person running operations, because that's who he is as a person. To John Ternus, is the person running hardware the second most important person at the company? And so, from that perspective, I could see it. But just in general, I don't agree, right? But yeah.
Well, being in charge of Apple Silicon and hardware does, I think, functionally make you the second most important person at Apple because of what you're in charge of. But that's more about the details of the contents, not about the title. Yeah. I think you might be right. I mean, I don't think anybody would say Sabit Khan is more important than Johny Srouji.
Yes.
No way. So, okay. Sure. It is a major role. There's no doubt about it. We don't need to count. Eddie Q's job is also important. Craig Federighi's job is also important.
So Joz, right? Joz is important.
Joz React's job
is incredibly important to Apple. So
absolutely,
they're all important. they're all good executives.
Important to me.
But
Apple leadership page.
It is a C-suite position, which we keep talking about.
Is.
But that is an important deal. I don't know what that says about the future, and I really hope that Srouji is in this, not following the same route that Johny took when he got his C-suite position. So we'll see. So Johny Srouji is going to be splitting the new hardware organization into 5 distinct teams under his new role. So we have 5 leaders. We have names for all of them. So Tom was picked by Ternus to succeed him. So he will take the role as head of hardware engineering. But this now goes into Johny Srouji. This role will not report to the CEO anymore.
Right.
It will report to the chief hardware officer who reports to the CEO.
Yep.
We have Sri Santhanam, who will head up the Silicon team. So you assume, this is Srouji's right-hand person, right?
Yep.
To kind of take this on. Friend of the show, Tim Millay will run platform architecture.
Yay, Tim.
So Tim has been on the show multiple times.
Yes.
Tim, you standing invitation to return whenever you like.
Tim's brother listens to Upgrade, right?
Yeah, so Brother Millay, you can tell Tim that he has a standing invitation to return. But Tim has been very present for a long time in Apple keynotes as the person who tends to explain the chip and what it can do.
Yes.
We then have Zhongjian Chen, who will be in charge of advanced technologies. I don't know what that means.
I don't know.
And Donny Nordhus, who will run program management. I also don't know what that means.
Yeah, that's okay.
But this is not my area of expertise.
The
other ones I can work out.
You're not the CHO. That's why.
Exactly. So I clearly cannot do this job. So there we go. We have people now. We can't really do much with that, but it's interesting to have those names. They're names that we now have. In the Rolodex as such. So that is all the additional information that we have. I have some questions that I want to get to from Upgradians about Tim, but I wanted to ask any additional areas of speculation that you may have. So, my one, and I'm going to say it again, I said it last time, I'll say it again, I'm going to keep saying it forever. I think there will be more C-suite positions in the future. That is my my thing that I think is going to happen, because it would be very strange to me to just have Johny Srouji elevated, because that is going to start hurting some feelings if that's the case. But what about you? Do you have any other areas that you wanted to touch on?
I want to say that when you've got hardware ascendant in the organization and the head of software has not been promoted, and that there's been some issues on the software side, that I would say there's a spotlight on Craig Federighi, and he has to execute, especially the Gemini integration Siri kind of thing. But we also know that like those home products that John Ternus likes so much have been held up because of software issues. Now, I think you could argue that it was because of AI issues that were really the responsibility of John Gianandrea, who is gone now because of that, and that's not on Federighi, but it's on Federighi to deliver. And I would say I don't know, because I don't have inside information about this, but I would say that if Federighi's not on the hot seat, I would say what I said, the spotlight is on him. And I do think he needs to deliver, because I think in an area where you've got this incredible hardware and these incredible chips, and at least for those of us who look closely, we feel like the software side is just not operating on the same level as the rest of Apple's business. From that perspective, you would think that the person in charge of software would be scrutinized. Now, I don't know, right? Like what the personal relationships are and what the strengths are that Craig Federighi brings to the table, and how he's perceived, and like all of that, I don't know. And so it's a complex issue. But I would just say, as an outsider, I look at that and say, I feel like Craig Federighi as a person, and also the software organization as a whole, feels like is going to be under a lot of scrutiny. But I also feel like the AI reset, where the AI stuff was kind of happening off on the side, and now it's been integrated into the organization, I feel like that hits the reset button a little bit, but still it's super, it doesn't erase what's gone on before. So I think that's going to be an issue.
My optimist's take on this, in the way that I could imagine this going, is that the 27 operating systems deliver. I think they should be able to deliver, because they will be using models that everybody knows are good, and Apple just has to implement them correctly. So I'm assuming that they deliver, and I believe that if they do, and they're received well, then Craig Federighi is elevated to Chief Software Officer by the end of the year. That's what I think will happen, but it's predicated on it working. But I think it will work. I do. As we stand here right now, I've been a big Debbie Downer about Apple Intelligence, I think for good reason, for the last couple of years. But I believe that they will be able to pull something together this year. I still don't think that the things that we saw at WWDC 2024 will ship. Because I think that they were completely fake things created with hope. But I think that they, in the meantime, will have had some features that do work, and that will work well, and they will implement them correctly across the operating systems. But the WWDC 24 stuff, I just don't know if it's feasible at all. And so I'm not expecting that to occur. But I just think if Federighi can actually pull some stuff together and change the perception of Apple in AI, I think that will be a bit of a win for him.
We'll see. The other thing that came out of Gurman's report that I thought was interesting is Mike Rockwell, who launched who got the Vision Pro to ship, and now I see people saying like, "Oh, he's no good. He did the Vision Pro." It's like he got that product out the door. I think that's a miracle. Mike Rockwell has been tasked with Siri, right? But also the report from Gurman is that like he's been angling for like a promotion and maybe like a CTO kind of role.
Yep.
I don't know quite what's going on there, but this is an interesting example where you've got some people who are well thought of, who are in kind of nebulous positions and have been given tasks to perform. And I don't know whether it's a power struggle or whether I don't know quite what's going on here, but that's the other thing to watch. Because like if Siri integration goes well, is Rockwell the one whose reputation is burnished by that?
Yeah.
And can they keep him? Do they want to keep him? Because it's the Alan Dye thing. It's like, does his opinion of his prowess match that of management? And I don't know. But he seems based on reports like a pretty remarkable person, but that doesn't necessarily mean that
he was brought in as a fixer in 2 areas, right?
Yes.
So they must think of him well, right? It's like you are a fixer.
Right, but if he comes in and says, well, I'm really disappointed if I'm not given a C-suite position, then you're like, well, I'm sorry, and that might be enough to make him leave, even if they like him. Like, that's always the challenge with this sort of thing.
But this is another reason why I hope for and can imagine larger executive change, like by creating these new roles like Srouji has. You just created 5 team leads now. Like, you can create new roles for people to get increased visibility in the organization and move up, right? So that like in 10 years time, friend of the show Tim Millay is the chief harbor officer, right? Or whatever it might end up being. I think that Apple needs to the people that are on that leadership page have been on that leadership page forever.
Yeah.
They have to start creating new people that could move in, or they end up leaving. And that's not great for the future of the organization. When you have somebody new in John Ternus in place, maybe that creates opportunity to kind of start moving people out and up without firing people, right? Like, that maybe don't need to be fired except for the fact that you want to have some fresh faces. And so we can start kind of laying the groundwork for that. Got some questions. Alan wrote in and said, "Do either of you see an official biography of the infamously private Tim Cook ever being produced? If so, is there someone you would see him trusting to write that story like Steve Jobs did of Walter Isaacson? It seems wild that someone who can make the case for the greatest CEO of all time might go down in history as essentially an enigma."
I'm going to say I think that before all is said and done, there will be a semi-official, if not official, Tim Cook book. But it won't be a cookbook. I mean, by definition, it will be a cookbook, but it's not going to be recipes from Tim.
Cooking up a storm.
I got to tell you what it's going to be. It's going to be, this is my prediction. It is going to be a lessons learned, my life and my challenges, and how that, it's going to be a business book. That's what I'm going to
want that.
That's what I'm going to say it is. It's going to, the people who yearn for a heartfelt biography about like Tim Cook and his, his life and I think you will be disappointed, because I do think it's going to be the when I think of what's the book that Tim Cook participates in, it's going to be like Apple University for Tim Cook. It's going to be Tim Cook and how lessons from his life informed his understanding of business. That's my prediction, is that there will eventually be that book.
So bad. Because, look, everything we know about Tim is that there really isn't much else to say. And that seems to be the choices of his life. He cares about work. He cares about business. He seems to have put his entire being into that.
Well, and when he shares biographical information, it's often in the context of either a business understanding or a core value that is applied to the business. Yeah. And so I can see a whole book that's about that. So not just like how I learned about this thing that made me think that it's great to not have any excess inventory in the channel, right? It is also like, in the South, I learned this lesson that is important, and it's why I'm committed to this particular set of values. But I can see that as that kind of a book. That's what I predict.
Logan wrote in and says, "As stated in his community letter, Tim Cook is famous for getting up every morning and reading emails from customers. Tim's email is public information, but Ternus's isn't as of now. Do you think that John Ternus will make his email public so he can continue this direct line of customer feedback?"
I think people are just gonna email all possibilities of Ternus and see what gets
he's
through.
Going to get John at apple.com. I'm sorry for whoever has that.
Yeah,
you're going to lose that email address, right?
By the way, I'm pretty confident that there is a staff who is the gatekeeper to the email and then passes the email to Tim. Because I've seen a lot of people say, "Oh, you think that they only feed Tim good stuff. But no, he also sees the bad stuff. They also feed him the bad stuff, but he still has
he is
gatekeepers.
not reading the fire hose of email.
No.
And is going to Tim
it's
at apple.com.
It's a curated subset. So yes,
but he
I would
sees
imagine
a spread of all of it, clearly.
There will be a CEO at apple.com or John at apple.com that will be go into the executive assistant pool and will be curated and passed to John Ternus, or his either that or the first time he appears at the iPhone event, his little credit will say John Ternus, CEO. Don't email me.
Don't email me.
One of those.
No, because look, the thing is, this will continue because it's not a Tim Cook thing. Jobs did it too. Like, this is I think, time-honored tradition now that, like, essentially it's possible to receive an email from the CEO of Apple. Like, they wrote them differently, but it's possible. Like, it is a thing that can happen and will continue to happen. So I expect that there will be a john@apple.com email address.
Probably.
And an anonymous person wrote in and says, is it delusional to think that Ternus would not get dragged into the politics, even with Cook taking ownership?
No, because they won't let it. I mean, I think, I don't think it's delusional. I think that they are going to make a concerted effort to not. That Tim Cook is going to be the voice of that. And people might try, but I don't think they're going to succeed.
Interesting. See, I think that he will and he should be. I think it's ridiculous to think that he won't be involved. Like, he's not going to be interfacing, maybe.
What is the dragged into? Is it, I mean, like, I got an email today that dragged John Ternus into politics because I got an email today from the union that represents the people at the closed Towson, Maryland Apple store that was the first unionized Apple store, and they're Apple shutting it down along with a couple other stores. Yeah. And they are doing like a press conference, and the entire like angle of their story pitch is, as Apple undergoes an executive transition, is it time for Apple's new executive team to change the way it handles its workers, right? Like, it's obviously it's a very self-serving, it's from the union, but so that's it. Is that dragged into? Well, then I guess, I mean, are people going to be able to point at politics and point at John Ternus? Sure. But I would say in terms of Apple's engagement with it, Apple has the ability to just not engage with John Ternus over that stuff and engage with other people. If putting a picture of John Ternus up and pointing at it and saying, see, shame, politics, then sure. But like, I would say that there is a real power in controlling where your executives go and what they say and who says it. And I think Apple's going to be pretty disciplined about that for a while.
I think I'm looking at it more from the functional side, not from the world side, like of people like pointing, like for example, if Xi Jinping is meeting with Tim Cook and he's like, I would like John Ternus to be there too, they're not going to like say no, right? Like, they'll manage it the best that they can, but ultimately, yeah, maybe he goes along, but he doesn't really do the talking. Tim does the talking. Like, I consider there a scenario in which he is involved as he should be as the CEO of the company, but not in that he's the person necessarily dealing with it in the same way that he wouldn't be dealing with the application of new HR procedures, which would be Deirdre O'Brien's role to do. But it's not like he's not going to know about it if it's something he needs to know about. That's kind of what I'm getting at more. But, like, I guess the dragged in part seems to suggest a little bit more kicking and screaming, which I'm not expecting as such. This episode is brought to you by Claude from Anthropic. Claude is the AI for minds that don't stop at good enough. It's the collaborator that actually understands your entire workflow and thinks with you. Whether you're debugging code at midnight or strategizing your next business move, Claude extends your thinking to tackle the problems that matter. If you're a developer spending half your day on tasks that you wish you could just hand off, Claude Code runs in your terminal, reads your code base, and can take on things like writing tests, refactoring, or debugging without you hand-holding it through every step. You can forget about basic web searches. Claude is an excellent tool for deep research. That means you can dig deeper with extensive sources, proper citations, and do it all in a fraction of the time. I use this kind of stuff frequently to help me with trying to think, going through like statistics and stuff like that. Like, can you grab me some statistics on this? Show me where you got them from. And what I like about the way that Claude Deep Research works is it can show me what it says, but then also source it so I can go check that if I want to. If you're considering adding a new tool to your setup, you want to know you're in good company. Companies like Stripe, Shopify, and Pfizer trust Anthropic with their rollout of AI in their businesses. Another tool that I've been using, Claude Cowork, for recently is helping me build some local web apps that I can use. I was keeping some Cortex brand sales stuff in a really bad numbers spreadsheet for a really long time, and that numbers spreadsheet was just long lists of sales numbers. And I was able to work with Claude Code and Claude Cowork to help build me a web app that runs on my Mac, and I can enter in my statistics, and it creates me loads of wonderful charts. It can do stock predictions and stuff like that to help me plan with things. It's really fantastic, and it's just something I would not have been able to build on my own. For problems worth solving, get started with Claude today at claude.ai/upgrade. That's CLAUDE.ai/upgrade, and check out Claude Pro, which includes access to all of the features mentioned right now. That is claude.ai/upgrade. Our thanks to Claude for their support of this show and Relay. We have some rumor roundup, Jason.
Yeah.
So Macworld is reporting that a source in the supply chain has shared with them the color options for the Pro iPhone this year.
Well, that's exciting.
We have light blue. It's described as somewhat similar to the current mist blue color of the base iPhone 17. Dark cherry, described as a deep wine-like red, not a bright fruit punch style red. Silver, this is described as similar to the iPhone 17 Pro's silver and white design, and a dark gray. So I've also pulled some of this information from 9to5Mac, who have an image as well that they've kind of made, like a render. So we'll have to say goodbye to our friend Orange, it looks like. But I personally, I like the look of that light blue. That looks really fun. I like the look of that. If that's
it looks like a real color. I mean, we'll see how it looks like in person. And the dark cherry, I'm sorry, that feels very much like the classic color, not a color from Apple. It's like it's a red tinted black. Yeah. Whereas the light blue is, at least in this concept, in this image, and we should say Macworld got this right last time. Same writer got this right last time. So that looks like something that's noticeable, and that you'll be like, oh, that's the new iPhone blue. I see. Yep.
Yeah, I dig the blue. I agree with you that I'm just not a fan of that kind of purpley reddish wineish color. It's just not for me.
No.
But it feels like what the blue was for this year's phones, this past year's phone, the 17, right? Where it was like very dark, so it's like a hint of a color.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy they're bringing back essentially a black phone. I think that was a bit of a miss from the lineup, like just to have silver. I think they should have also had a darker color, but not at the expense of there being two colors. So 2 colors, 2 neutrals. I think that's a great lineup. And I'm excited about the blue. I'll miss the orange, but I'm happy to get something, hopefully, that's also pretty vivid in color. And that blue one, I dig. I dig that. Mark Gurman has also shared that he expects the touchscreen MacBook Pro will most likely ship in early 2027, not late 2026, because of the ongoing RAM shortages, which is a bit of a bummer.
Yeah, it's funny because he's been hedging. I mean, honestly, right? From the beginning when he was talking about this, he said it could be early 27. It's Stephen and I on the Liftoff podcast always used to joke that whenever anybody talked about a mission that was probably headed for Q4, what we would always say is Q4 is Q1. Like Q4 is Q1. It's just so easy to push those back. And since the beginning, Gurman was like, maybe they're targeting end of the year, but it might be next year. So clearly it was one of those things where it's like even the faintest gust of wind would send it over the edge.
Yeah, I'm a bit disappointed about it because I would like to upgrade my laptop. And I'm waiting for this because I think it's going to be interesting and or really good to have a touchscreen Mac. And so I'm waiting, but I would love to have a little bit more RAM and a little bit more storage than I do in my MacBook Air. my M2 MacBook Air, which is also it's feeling its age, it's showing its age a little bit, that computer. So I really I'd like it a lot, and I would also I've been going through this ongoing disaster of backups, which I've been chronicling on the Connected podcast, and so I now have my old MacBook Pro, my M1 MacBook Pro. I've been running to do some backups and to back up my Dropbox account and stuff like that. And I have remembered how much I enjoy a high refresh rate screen on a Mac. Oh, it looks so good. ProMotion on that display. I love it.
Wow, finally getting your money's worth there.
Well, no, because I'm not plugged it into the studio display.
No.
So I look forward to eventually being able to have a laptop that can drive my studio display XDR correctly.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. So that will be... Yeah, I'm excited about all of that. But then it will be so funny that I'll finally have the display specs that I want, but then it will be a touchscreen that will just be closed whenever I'm at the studio. But I do use my Mac. I've been using my Mac more and more at home recently, rather than my iPad for work stuff. Like, I use my iPad for all kinds of things, but for a while I was using my iPad Pro for any kind of work stuff. But now I have this feeling of like, I'm just going to get my MacBook out of my bag. It's just, I know I'm just going to be able to do whatever I need to do easier and quicker using the MacBook.
Sure.
And so I've been jumping for that. Like, love my iPad Pro, use it for all kinds of stuff. But if it's a work thing of any description, I just want to grab my MacBook Air now. Which has been another part of me where I'm like, MacBook Neo. Every time, MacBook Neo, So every time there's any kind of, I was like, MacBook Neo.
MacBook Pro, MacBook Neo,
MacBook Pro
Air.
I'd be bringing the MacBook Pro home every day, but I could just use the MacBook Neo, right? No. A long time ago, we had discussed Apple suing John Prosser over the manner in which Prosser leaked information about iOS 26.
Right.
Which was essentially, allegedly, paying someone to break into a roommate's iPhone, and that roommate worked at Apple, and show John Prosser information and pay them for it. And then we'll also followed it up by talking about Prosser's seeming lack of cooperation with the court. This case continues, and this inconsistent cooperation over this lawsuit also seems to be continuing. So Mac Rumors is reporting that recent filings suggest that Prosser is only partially cooperating. Quote, while he has provided some responsive materials, he has failed to fully respond to certain requests and has not responded at all to others. Apple's lawyers are essentially asking the judge to force Prosser to explain why he is not being forthright and provide the documentation. Prosser's co-defendant, Michael Ramacchiotti, appears to be continuing to do all that has been asked of him thus far, and it looks like a potential settlement is on the cards between him and Apple because of this. I'll also say Jay Peters at The Verge had a really good feature story about the whole ordeal, so if you're like trying to catch up with what's going on here, Peters spoke to Prosser at certain times to try and get information, which Prosser seems to be like, I would say maybe in a way that feels accurate to the type of person he portrays himself on his YouTube channel, is like saying things that aren't at all backed up in what is going on in the court filings. Of like, he's like, oh, I'm fully cooperating, but then Apple and the court are saying that he isn't. So I still, like, at the time, like, struggle to get my head around this, because it feels like Apple is eventually going to destroy this man's life. And it, from the outside, kind of appears that John Prosser is trying to pretend that that's not going to happen, as he continues to also do what he has done. And Jay Peters at The Verge says that, like, because it seems like he's been watching Prosser's videos and, like, for the research for this article, and he's like, you can see that while he continues to do the leaks, the process in which he is reporting appears to have adapted a little bit, that like he is trying to hedge a little bit more, so maybe he's trying to, at least not pulling these exact tricks. But I find this a fascinating story to keep track of, because right now it feels like we're hurtling towards a disaster for this man.
I do wonder. I mean, if he's got legal representation, I do wonder what his lawyers are saying. I did have a thought about him continuing to post stories about Apple rumors, which is one of the things Apple, I think, wants to try to do is get him to stop reporting about Apple rumors.
Yeah, that was one of the things Apple was seeking, right? Was
right.
to force him to stop.
So I do wonder if one of the pieces of advice, assuming he's got, actual legal counsel, one of the pieces of advice is you need to continue to post what you post so that we can, and again, not a lawyer here, but I wonder if it's so that we can say this is part of your profession, this is part of your channel, this is your business that you've built, and that it's active, and that you are continuing to do it, and that, to make the argument essentially like, don't take this active part of his business away. Like to make the argument that saying never report about Apple anymore is going to do more damage to his business than is justified. Because fundamentally, it's a big question. It's a big thing to ask. To say, in the United States, where we have a First Amendment, to say we want to bar this person from their speech. And having it be in his business and an act of publishing that is happening on an ongoing basis, I wonder if that's like maybe even the lawyer saying you need to keep posting because you need to keep your business active because that's part of our argument. Or the concern here is that this guy is like posting through it and is not getting good advice. So I guess we'll find out. But it is very weird. Also, given the other defendant who seems to, arguably have had the worst behavior here is the one. I mean, maybe that's why that's the one who's like going to Apple and trying to negotiate a settlement and all of that. Yeah. But it is a little bit weird, and I appreciate Jay Peters at The Verge checking in about it. But it's a very strange situation.
Yeah, like there was this one part again. Like I had to do a bunch of Googling this morning to try and understand some terms, right? But there was this one part in Jay Peters' article that I find I don't understand how the law works, but a clerk entered a default against Prosser earlier that month after he repeatedly failed to respond to Apple's complaint. The company said in a filing that Prosser had been served personally on July 29, 2025, and had missed the August 19th deadline. Apple gets to continue its case against Prosser and Ramacchiotti, only now Prosser can't participate in his own defense.
Yeah, we talked about this before, and I think that there's this idea that they will be able to move the court to set aside that default judgment, and that they will engage in the case. But it is a very weird situation that you let it get to that point, and that it still seems kind of unclear about what's going on with his defense of this.
Yeah. And that it's okay, so that happened, and you're like, oh, we're going to try and get them to push that aside, but also we're still fully not participating. All of it to me is just like, it just feels so disastrous, the whole thing. And like, I agree with what you're saying about like, there being a First Amendment, and maybe he's continuing to post for that reason. But like from Apple's perspective, it's like they obviously see what he does as something different because of the methods in which it came. And
from
their perspective, they just want to stop him, right? Like
but this is the thing: is there's what he did, and there's the harm that it caused, and that you could argue that's illegal. I'm personally skeptical of the idea that you run from that to this person is barred from performing their act as a journalist.
Yeah,
which we can debate it, but like, let's just say that John Prosser is a journalist. We might not like him. We might not like what he does, whatever. But let's say it. Like, that is, to me, a very different argument. The idea and that's what in the original reports about this jumped out at me is Apple wants him to never write about Apple or report about Apple ever again. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't think the law barring a person from speaking, I'm really, really skeptical about that, because that gets to whole like freedom of speech issues that are separate from did he induce these people to break their contracts and potentially even pay them to induce them to break these contracts to do things that's not legal, but that's not necessarily the same as saying, and now this person is barred from a whole area of speech. That's like another aspect of it. Not lawyers, just saying as a journalist, I find that troubling.
Yep. It's a mess. It is absolutely a mess. And I'm still, every time this pops up every few months, I still can't believe that it's continuing and that it hasn't been resolved yet.
I can't believe that John Prosser doesn't seem to be portrayed as being an active participant in these affairs. That's the part that really gets me.
Exactly.
It's like, that's the part that baffles me, is not that there are lawyers jousting about this in court, but that John Prosser then is sort of mentioned as being like, well, maybe he'll be involved or not, which is, I don't know what's going on there, but I guess eventually we'll find out.
Yeah, and like my favorite part in Jay Peters' piece is that he says somewhere along the lines of, Prosser still appears to be in the U.S. It's like, oh my God, like I guess it is to that level, right? Where like maybe eventually the way he deals with this is he flees. Prosser tells The Verge he is still in the U.S. That's not great. This episode is brought to you by Steam Clock. A lot of mobile apps get the job done, but they aren't exactly delightful. When an app is great, though, you look forward to adding it to your home screen. Steam Clock Software builds mobile apps for companies that care about taste. They're a design and development studio based in Vancouver, Canada, and they've been shipping iOS and Android apps for over 15 years. Their clients are growing tech companies that care about mobile but don't have the in-house team to build something truly great. Steam Clock works with companies to level up their apps so they can go from "it's holding us back" to "it's pulling its weight." Some of their clients discovered the hard way that vibe coding your way to the App Store is not a product strategy. What makes Steam Clock worth calling isn't just that they execute well, it's that they'll help you figure out the right approach and give you an honest read in your situation before you commit to anything. Their client apps have been downloaded over 10 million times, and they've helped 5 of their clients through acquisitions. If you're building something and need a mobile team that cares just as much as you do, Steam Clock is where to start. Visit steamclock.com/upgrade to get in touch. That's steamclock.com/upgrade. Our thanks to Steam Clock for their support of this show and all of Relay. It's time to finish out on some Ask Upgrade questions. This first one comes in from Mark, who says, do you ever imagine yourself being in a similar situation as someone like Mark Gurman, where you have a secret source in Apple's supply chain and you were the one breaking the rumors that everyone's talking about? Or are you comfortable with your level of analysis where you break down the possibilities of the rumors and come up with your own theories?
Well, I want to say, Mark Gurman has more than supply chain sources. He's got Cupertino sources.
Yeah, big sources.
And he cultivates sources, and he's got multiple sources, and he puts a lot of work into it. And I think that's an important part of understanding what Mark Gurman does is he's putting in the work to do this. He's not a passive receiver of information. This program sometimes passively receives information, but Mark Gurman is a reporter who is dealing with sources and checking and double checking with other sources and things like that. So it's a high level thing that I am not interested in doing and have not been interested in doing in my career. And so I do not imagine myself in that situation. That's not a role I am interested in playing.
Yep.
I was thinking how you just posted a podcast about somebody who does this. It actually just came up. But,
so I will promote this. So just an episode of Cortex today with Jason Schreier. Jason Schreier is Mark Gurman for video games.
Yeah, at Bloomberg.
Schreier works at Bloomberg, and I would say actually, Mark Gurman is who he is mostly for Apple. Schreier is the entire video game industry. So, imagine someone who is connected in every tech company, and that is who Jason Schreier is for video games. If you care about video game news, you come across Jason's work because people talk to him. And so this was a lot of my conversation with him, was kind of asking what it is like to have this kind of trust and to work with sources. And it was really interesting to hear his process. So if you're intrigued about what it is like for somebody who has this kind of sourcing and how they manage all of that, you can go listen to it. But it informed to me, it underlined to me why I would not want to be this person. I would not want to have to think about my, as Jason called it, OPSEC as much as he does. That you are dealing with information that could mean that people lose their jobs. That could mean that people are in really tough situations, and you have to handle that and handle the trust and handle it all very responsibly. That seems horrifying to me. And also it feels like a level of work that I am not interested in. Like, I care more about talking about things that have happened or information that is received by others than being someone who has to try and cultivate and break that news. That's just not what I'm interested in. I care more about what we do. And it just seems like, I don't know, it just seems very, very stressful in a way that I wouldn't want to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, it's a choice, and it's not a choice that I think either of us are interested in making. So,
No.
yeah.
No.
It's fun. It's fun when something comes in over the transom, but like,
Yeah.
breaking scoops and cultivating secret sources and like, no, I'm not.
I like it as the occasional time that 9 to 5 Mac writes an article about a thing we said. You know, like, that's fun for me. Everything else is like, I don't know, man. That seems hard.
Yeah.
Macho writes in and says, what do you think about Apple rebranding any chips for the Neo as maybe a new N series chip? I could see them coming out and saying the Neo was so successful, we're making chips for them. They're still just binned A series chips, but they could call it whatever they want. Do you think they could do this?
I mean, they could do this. Macho wants to know if they would do it. And I mean, again, the marketing power of Apple is incredible. They can do whatever they want. It doesn't solve any of their problems with bin chips, though.
No.
I don't think they will do something like this. I think they've got enough labels, and I think Apple's been pretty good at labeling chips what they are and not sticking fake labels on them to call them things that they're not. So I think they'll just kind of continue doing what they're doing. But they could. I mean, if they found value in it, they would do it.
Do you think that they pay any mind to to people saying like, oh, you know, this is an iPhone chip and it can do all of this and the iPad can't? Do you think they care about that kind of criticism?
No.
Like, that's not what their product is.
I think there is a very small group of people who will make statements like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think the people in the market who are buying these products care.
Yeah, that's fair. Phil writes in and says, my current iPad is an 8-year-old iPad Pro that I exclusively use for travel. I'm thinking about replacing it with a MacBook Neo, since I like the idea of having a full Mac with me when I travel, but I need something that will let me download streaming shows and movies for offline viewing, for example, on a plane without Wi-Fi. Netflix and the like do not support this. They don't allow downloads except on mobile devices. Is there a way I could do this, or should I just stick with an iPad?
Stick with an iPad.
I think for this very specific use case, if that is that important to you,
that's what it's
what
for.
you're going to have to do.
They won't let you do it on desktop because they're afraid that you're going to crack the DRM and pirate it and stuff. So you got to use the iPad.
Or you get used to buying a bunch of stuff from the Apple TV app and just like watching that on your Mac, which you could do. You know,
it's not going to be a Netflix show.
No,
right? So
no,
that's the answer.
So you have to change the things you're doing. But yeah, it's like it depends on what is actually the most important thing to you. Like, is the idea of having a full computer with when you travel, is that more important than downloading this content? But if the downloading of content is that important, then you have no choice because they don't let you do it. It's just the app versions only where they do that. Logan writes in and says, if Apple launches an AI-based Siri chatbot, as has been rumored, do you think that they would block it from presenting information, say, like rumors of upcoming products? If you ask Claude or Gemini, it will tell you all of the rumored features, but I doubt Apple would want Siri being a spokesperson for features that they don't want public in the first place.
I don't know. I mean, Apple blocks some stuff and pre-codes some things into Siri, and there's still going to be like a layer here where Apple is controlling what goes to and from and filters things out. So I don't know. Maybe.
It is an interesting question. It's like the actual question here is like, I don't know, but there is the broader question of how Apple is going to tune Gemini's responses. and what they will and will not allow, like the guardrails as such, and like will this be part of the guardrails? Like it's going to be interesting to see. Like this was something we wondered about with Apple Intelligence, but it just turned out that Apple Intelligence just wasn't capable enough that there really was much you could have to worry about in the end. But now they will be dealing with something quite different, and like what that's going to look like is going to be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, they'll make some attempts, but I don't know. My guess here is that they won't do a lot of this stuff because everybody's looking for the gotchas from Apple, but like it's not like you can't go into Safari and search and read things like that Apple doesn't want you to see, because Apple's not going to intercede there. And I think this is probably one of those areas. But they are kind of customizing what the Siri guardrails are, and we will have to see what those are.
And finally, Darren says, assuming that the MacBook Pro that supports touch comes out at some point, what is the over-under on whether they'll also support Apple Pencil? Do you think there could be any special features that you may get if using an Apple Pencil, or do you think a Mac-specific version could be released?
I am going to say, I'm not going to give you an over or under. I'm going to say they're not. And I got two reasons. One is the incredible thinness of the top plane of a laptop really reduces what can fit in there. And two, you can't detach the screen or even fold it back real far. And the ergonomics of reaching over the keyboard to write on the screen with the Apple Pencil are lousy. And so I'm very skeptical that Apple will do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just not the setup that works for the Pencil. It would be weird.
No.
It's like too much pushing against it. It would be too much wobbling.
Well, and you're pushing against the screen. It's going to fold back.
Yeah. Where like a tap
move
is very
as you push on it.
Right? Yeah.
I just don't see it ergonomically unless they completely rethink how MacBook Pro ergonomics works, which I don't think they'll do.
And I also just think from a product market perspective, once the Macs support touchscreens, they need to keep some reasons for the iPad, and like the iPad having the Pencil is like a good thing that it can do.
Sure.
That if you care about that, you still have that world available to you. That I don't think that an Apple Pencil support on the MacBook Pro makes sense. And also, let's just get touchscreen dealt with first before we start putting styluses in as well.
Yep.
If you would like to send in a question of your own, or if you have any feedback or follow-up for this week's show, please go to upgradefeedback.com. Thank you to our members who support us with Upgrade Plus. This week, Jason, let's get an update on Jeopardy.
Oh, man.
Because I know there's been a lot going on.
Still an update on Jeopardy.
All right, so go to getupgradeplus.com. You can sign up and get longer ad-free versions of the show each and every week. If you want to find a video version of this show, just go to YouTube and search for the Upgrade Podcast. I would like to thank Fitbod, Mercury Weather, Claude, and Steam Clock for their support of this week's episode. And most of all, I'd like to thank you for listening. Until next time, say goodbye, Jason.
Goodbye, Mike Hurley.